Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Anna Maria Sempreviva, and I've been the coordinator of the mobility program, the FarmConners project. And together with me, there are some participants of the FarmConners project, which has been working with the mobility, granted the mobility, or been evaluating some proposal for mobility. And so we are talking about the mobility and networking of researchers after COVID-19. Why this? Because, I mean, the COVID-19 has a kind of stopped this mobility program because of the nobody could move around. And then we only had two fortunate people that was granted with mobility. One just before the closing with Konstanze Kölle, and the one just after the opening was Vinit Dige, but who is not with us today. But then we will talk about how this COVID has impacted to research mobility and networking of researchers, and what would be the future of this kind of activities in project, in the European projects. So this why we made this video, because actually we had a deliverable. Go down. It's frozen. Oh yeah, we have the deliverable, which was a lecture on added value of mobility schemes in coordination action in Europe. But I mean, there was no meaning to have a lecture like this, also because there was the mini symposium was online, and there were at that time only one person had participated to the mobility program. So what we decided to do is to try to discuss among us about our experience in the mobility, and then what we see the future of this mobility in Europe. And the agenda is this one. First, each of us will introduce, give a brief introduction of our activities, and then we will debate around these questions. What did you think when the mobility work package was announced? Which impact did you expect on the various aspects of your activity, as a researcher, as a work package leader, and so on? Which are the pros and cons of mobility programs for you? What do you think about this? What do you think about new approach to mobility, like remote mobility, virtual mobility? Is the culture of Zoom or other video conferences going to consolidate? We believe that these are important questions, and quite a lot of people is curious about this. So, let's start now with who wants to start first about answering the question. Now I can see Konstanze is the first after me.
Yes, so should I maybe just introduce myself first? My name is Konstanze Kölle. I'm a researcher at SINTEF, and I work on wind farm control. And in FarmConners, the project we are talking about here today, I was the work package leader of one work package, and I also applied to the mobility scheme and visited DTU for 1 week. And later on, I evaluated also another mobility application. and participated in addition in what we called remote co-working during the pandemic. So do you want me now to give the word to the next one to introduce?
Yeah, I think it's Tuhfe.
All right, sure thing. So I'm Tuhfe Göcmen. I'm researcher in DTU Wind Energy in Technical University of Denmark. I was the host. I had the pleasure to host two of the physical mobilities that we had within the project. I'm also the technical coordinator of the project. So having both of them in sort of the biggest wind energy department within Europe was really beneficial, not just for FarmConners, but I think also for overall networking within the field of farm flow modeling and control. So I do work with data-driven flow modeling and control, and I also participated, as well as being the host for the mobilities, I also participated in the remote co-working sessions, which we had to do with the second closing towards the end of 2021 and beginning of 2022, originally planned physical, but converted to online due to new regulations, new restrictions coming in for the travel. I'm looking forward to discuss more on these experiences we all had together. So the next person is Michael, probably.
Sorry. Yeah, my name's Michael Smailes. I'm a research engineer at ORI Catapult, and my background is mostly in grid integration. And I've been working with my fellow colleagues in FarmConners, developing wind farm control and how that interacts with the electricity grids. I unfortunately missed the physical mobility side of it, but I did get to participate in what we're calling the remote co-working, which was really beneficial, I think, when we were trying to develop a paper towards the end of the project, and really helped us set out the boundaries of what the paper was going to explore. So I found that very beneficial.
Yeah, I remember the youth wrote an email to me asking some details about the mobility program.
Yeah, I think at the time the things were just starting to open up, and we had ambitions to try and meet in person, and then unfortunately things took a turn for the worse, and yeah, we had to do it as a remote session instead.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Irene?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Irene Guinoa. I'm the head of control engineering in the wind energy department of CENER in Spain, the Spanish Renewable Energy Center, working in wind turbine and wind farm control, and as participant in FarmConners project, where I was a task leader, also evaluator of proposal, and finally kind of a host for virtual co-working. So, and it was a new experience in that sense, and I'll be happy to share our thoughts and experiences on that.
Okay, so now you can start to, who wants to start first, I mean, to answer the first question? Was a mobility program a surprise for you when you saw it in the project?
I can maybe start. So I was not part of the proposal writing for this project, so I didn't know that there would be a mobility work package. So for me, it was basically new at the kickoff meeting we had in FarmConners. And to be honest, I didn't think it would concern me so much, this mobility scheme. So I was like, yeah, okay, so you can visit others. But still, I had the idea, okay, that might be a nice opportunity to work closer with your project partners. But I couldn't really see for me how this would work. I'm sure if someone else was directly thinking, oh, I will participate.
Similar to you, Konstanze, I wasn't involved in the drafting, so I only heard about it in the project kickoff, I suppose. I had the pleasure of being part of a mobility scheme within a different project. So I think I'd already had some positive experience with that when I actually went across to SINTEF for about a month, and found that very beneficial. So I was quite looking forward to that, and was encouraging others in ORI Catapult to try and apply. So it's maybe a slightly different take, but I guess prior experience helps sometimes.
So from my side, I have heard the name, the mobility program from another previous project, but didn't know in detail which was the concept behind and how did it work. And so for me, it was kind of new. And yeah, I think it makes a difference with respect to usual project meetings that we used to have before COVID physically, and goes beyond just making, let's say, random visits to others. It's a more well-organized direct objectives and so on. So it helps a lot to make the most of the time spent in the visits.
The length of time that you spend as well, normally with the mobility scheme, is slightly different from what you'd normally do. Which I think is highly beneficial in developing new relationships and seeing how others work, different countries. And there's so much you can learn from different organizations and the way things are set up. So I think that's something that's highly beneficial, and definitely something I would recommend to anyone that has the opportunity, I think, to go on one of these schemes.
Yeah, I think you are pointing to the best thing, that is to build a real team within the different entities participating in the project. Which sometimes is hard to attain there are many partners, but I think it's a very good tool for that.
Actually, I want to ask a question about, was the RPWin the project that you were mobility, Michael?
Yes, yeah, it was. So it was a few years ago now. I was just finishing my...
Because I was managing that one as well.
Yeah.
And you, also you, Irene, because I think that was the first mobility program that was in a project.
For me, yes, I had heard about the RPWin, but yeah. I wasn't involved in that project. So,
no, you were not. Because I'm actually, why me? Because I'm a mobility person. I mean, I've been using the mobility since '84 to travel between Italy and Denmark, and then I'm two parallel lives, and it was really a great thing, a great experience to have the foot in two places. And then I was coordinating two networks, three networks actually. So I mean, I spent my life in mobility, and I've seen that. I mean, it's really give you a lot of things, a lot of networking in all respect, human perspective and scientific perspective, everything. Yeah, thank you, Michael, for this positive.
Yeah, no, but Anna Maria, I would like to thank you for this mobility scheme here, because although I in the beginning didn't really see the immediate value for myself, maybe it was a really great opportunity. And since we in the beginning needed to define a bit more detailed what we're going to do here in FarmConners, we thought at some point, okay, maybe we should really intensively work on this for some days and visit each other, because it's really a difference if you see the person directly or if it's just all the time on the screen. And just for me, I was new to the wind farm control community when I joined FarmConners. So for me, it helped a lot to physically visit Tuhfe and to get to know her better, just to feel more confident also later on in virtual meetings like this one now, and to find my role better in the project. So I think especially to form new teams, but I think that was said before here now, it helps a lot.
Yes. Thank you, Konstanze. But Tuhfe, you were not surprised about it.
Not really, but for the proposal stage, we definitely took the inspiration from IRP Wind, right? So you already had good experiences. So we came in full on, it's going to be great, especially because it's a coordination action with a lot of people, a lot of other partners. We thought maybe it's going to create also much closer relationship in the industry as the end users of the technology, because, you know, the FarmConners has the big ambition at the end of the road to increase the adoption or ensure further adoption of the technology, right, by the end users. But of course, you know, COVID sort of took a bit of a hammer for all of these things, took a bit of a stopper. But still, it was super nice before when Konstanze visited DTU, came and we were in the same office, same desk, shared it for like 1 full week. It was really great because from her, although I wasn't visiting anywhere, I was still in the same desk, in the same office. Through her, I could actually see how the working culture is different between the two countries. And even as the host, you get a lot out of the mobility because you do see how it is different. Also, socially, personally as well, right? Because we are both of us are sort of expats, born and raised in different countries, but work in other countries. And then we have already a cultural diversity of how the education and working in research is, and then compare that with two different perspectives. Also, of course, being female in a male-dominated working environment, we were discussing about all of these things when she was visiting, which wouldn't be possible in any other way, not in a project meeting, which is just 2 days. Maybe you have 1 5-minute chats over the project meeting dinner and so on. It's very different mobility, not just only creating the teams, but also, of course, sharing the working cultures between two countries, two institutions, or more, with people with a wider, diverse background, right?
But I must say that this I was a little bit I mean, because mobility actually it's a little bit longer period.
Yeah.
The real mobility is 6 months, 1 year, 3 months.
Yeah.
But I mean, for projects like coordination actions like this, which are only 2 years time, so it's very good to have this intensive campaigns or writing the papers. I mean, because also talking to other people into the same organization, because it's not only the host, it's also the environment that you visit. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, then I mean, I think that we have seen some pros, many pros for now. But is there any cons? I mean, the mobility, like this one, you can see a cons of mobility, longer period, perhaps.
For me, it's not a con, but I would say it's a challenge to schedule the planned dates for the mobility, since it's not always easy to manage with different projects, different activities and commitments, and to fully book one full, in this case, 1 full week, or if we are talking about months, that's another thing. Sometimes it's challenging. So it's not in itself a con, but yes, it's a challenge.
Yeah, I agree that can or is a challenge. On the other hand, that's actually also a strength if you have set aside the time in a calendar. It's easier to really focus on this, and this also belongs to maybe the next question already, the virtual mobility, or what we call remote co-working. Like blocking our calendars and saying, okay, we will work together on this specific topic on these days, made it easier to stay focused and to not accept too many other meeting invitations. And also, while working on the same things, if you want to discuss something, the other one directly knows what you mean. Like otherwise, you work 1 day with a topic, the other one 5 days later, and it's harder to discuss because you need some time to get into the topics again. So
yeah, you focus on one task, not being an effective multitask. So yeah.
Others?
I guess one of the cons now would be logistics. In the post-COVID world, it becomes much harder potentially to schedule travel across different countries. It definitely wasn't a con when the program started a few years ago, but it's maybe something that's going to be more challenging in future. Hopefully not, but yeah.
Well, and another thing, of course, what relates to any travel is traveling is not that environmentally friendly, especially when we are talking about within Europe. It's usually at least one flight. But then again, if you have these mobilities and meeting like for one intense week or 2 weeks, it's better than traveling 5 times for one day.
Yeah. No, definitely. But since you touched upon the topic already, Michael, I guess maybe also looking at the other questions that is coming ahead, how it can look post-COVID is also a little bit more challenging now, because maybe not everybody is at the office still. If you look at some of our backgrounds, you can still that we are not necessarily fully back on the office. For example, I'm following 2 to 3 days in the office and 2 to 3 days at home working situation, which is becoming more and more sort of the new normal in a lot of the research institutes, is what I'm seeing. So then with the mobility, it becomes maybe a little bit less to get the most out of it, because maybe not everybody is in the workspace at the same time. So one way around it might be maybe mobility should be longer in the near future, also hosting co-working in other places than just the offices or the workspace. That can be one way. But also, of course, who knows what it's going to look like in the future. It can also be half remote and half physical. You know, it could be hybrid mobilities in the future as well. So these are the new formats you might be looking at. But overall, the physical space of working, I think, is changing, especially for the research institutes, or for the people like us who are not necessarily having to work at the lab every day and has a place, or just, you know, working behind the computer most of the time, basically.
Yeah, and now that you mention, probably the hybrid approach is also a good option in terms of green transition, since we are working in trying to avoid CO2 emissions and so on. But if we are all the time traveling, not making use of the digital tools that we have already at hand, that makes things a bit incoherent in my opinion. So having a balance on that could be a good option also for other project meetings as well.
Yeah, I guess the point was brought up earlier, but yeah, trying to have that intense work while you're traveling, make the most of anything, of all the time that you've been away, and maybe that puts more pressure or requires more commitment from the host institution to try and maximize that benefit. So if you work 20 or 40% of the time in the office normally, then maybe if you're hosting, you should up the amount of time that you would spend in the office, or the amount of contact time that you spend with the host, at least, whether that's in the office or elsewhere, to try and really maximize that time that they're away. I guess as well, for the person coming across, they're not going to have their normal office setup at home, so that would make working at home potentially more challenging. So they'd potentially be more reliant on the office space that could be provided by the host.
And for those that have experienced both the physical and the remote co-working, how did you feel the difference, and yeah, the potentials, and what you would prefer? And yeah, I'm very interested also in knowing that.
Yeah, of course, as let's say social animals, it's always good to meet people also directly and talk about things in person. And the advantage of having virtual mobility is, of course, that you're staying like at home, and you have your normal evenings, and staying at a hotel or other place might not be as relaxing for some as being at home. But to be honest, I was more committed when I was on the real mobility, and when I was in Denmark, I just said, okay, I'm away. I cannot participate in meetings, but okay, of course, that was also before the pandemic started. So most meetings were actually physical. By the time we had this remote co-working, most meetings were online. So it was too easy to join some meetings in between. So that's really, you really have to commit yourself. But I think both, as we just said, it both have advantages, but especially maybe in the beginning of the project and to get to know people, it's really beneficial to meet them. And then also you have more this social around, like when we had this remote co-working at lunchtime, we went away from our computers and just had lunch, maybe with other colleagues when we were at the office or just alone at home. And of course, when you visit someone, you have also this social interaction during breaks, which is really valuable. Yeah, so I'm sorry, it's no clear answer, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
From my side, but maybe Tuhfe has a clearer.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think very interesting, right? How people like to collaborate, or what makes collaboration more efficient, right? In terms of social interactions and in terms of physical interactions. And so if we have not met in person during the project, that would have been a different story, I feel like. So still within FarmConners, we were lucky enough that we had the kickoff together. And we also had a workshop in Leuven in person, which was maybe 1 or 2 weeks before the pandemic started in Europe. So we got lucky that we actually saw each other more than once in person. So we already knew each other a little bit. We already had spent some time. And then on top of that, having the remote co-working was somewhat easier because nobody's strangers anymore. I'm guessing for an entirely new project with entirely new faces, maybe that wouldn't necessarily be as efficient as the way we had the remote co-working with, because it would be with strangers, with the people that you haven't seen maybe below, below the waistline ever, and that's a little bit of a different situation, I guess. But again, it's interesting. This is a field on its own, I suppose, how collaboration actually works. And for us, at least for this group, it's we were still lucky to have sort of best of both worlds. And we can talk about now comparison of the physical versus remote co-working, right? And so it's still a lucky position to be in. Of course, we wished we could use even more of the resources that we were given in order to travel and get to see other workplaces also in person more. But I guess for the new projects, or how the mobility can continue, for example, in the upcoming projects, then perhaps still at least the first interaction in person is kind of critical and maybe even crucial. And after that, remote co-working or online meetings, I guess at this point, is simply inevitable.
Remote co-working, how did you come to the co-working? Because I actually have to change the slide, because of course it's a remote co-working, not mobility, because you called it like that. But how did you reach this co-working?
I cannot remember who came up with the labeling right now. Who is the name mother? Is it you?
Yes, I think it was me. Originally, Tuhfe and Michael wanted to visit SINTEF, like visit me here at SINTEF. And then the second lockdown happened, and at some point we had to decide, okay, we have to cancel it, but instead we decided to still allocate this week to work on the FarmConners deliverables. Yes, just because we also had to. And we thought it's easier because we already had blocked our calendars for this week. And then we just tried it, So during some working periods, we were in a virtual meeting room, but each one was working on their own task. But of course, when you had some questions in between, it would be like sitting in an office. You would just ask, hey, what do you think about this or that? Yeah, so that worked really well. But
Yeah,
we can also label it differently. I'm not.
I like the name. Yeah,
it's very nice. No, just because I mean, I was thinking how to link the mobility to that, because in a way, there is a kind of transition from mobility to something else, which is that's why I thought also virtual mobility, because I mean, virtually you are together somewhere else in a space which is not the cloud. You move away from your office. That's I'm just not concerned, but I mean, I'm just thinking that it would be nice to have a transition name which included the mobility word. And then from virtual mobility, I mean, whatever, remote mobility. I think virtual mobility could be, what is called a solution. But I mean, you have plenty of time. I retired now, so I mean, I leave you the future. I just can give you my feelings. So the culture of Zoom or the platform will stay, I guess.
I would argue so. I think they will stay, and they will become also part of the physical meetings as well. There will always be, you know, for some people it will always be more convenient to join online for whatever reason, and the people who are hosting either events or discussions or remote co-working sessions will always, I think, provide that opportunity for people. I think from now on, for the bigger conferences as well, we can perhaps assume that there will always be an online option too. So I think we're looking at the era when the conferences are going to be hybrid as well, if not fully online. So we will see. I guess there is the first one coming up, Torque 2022 in Delft. I'm planning to go, for example, in person, but I know already several colleagues from the US planning to join online. So because I mean, it's also better for the environment, especially if you're crossing continents and so on. So it's, you know, I think it is there to stay in terms of working together, as long as you remember to exercise a little bit and leave the, you know, computer for doing something else around. Unfortunately, not with the people that you're having the mobility with. I guess they are still a good option. But I would always say that in terms of mobility, in terms of working together, in terms of co-working, I think they are better than nothing, but they're not ideal, the remote options or the Zoom rooms. I'm curious what the other remote co-working participants think about that.
Yeah, I think it's always better to make it directly, and we still are humans, so we need that contact. But there's something important in what you're saying regarding, for example, other types of physical meetings like conferences and so on. The hybrid approach, I think it's also good for reconciliation. The family conciliation in the working place. So sometimes people are have different family situations that they have to assist, and this may be a way of still being at the forefront and being participating and so on, but being able to keep a balance with their personal life. So I think this is something very positive that we should take of that.
I think you're right, there will be that hybrid approach, and I think that's going to be the hardest part. I think it's relatively easy to have a Zoom meeting when everyone's online. It's relatively easy to have an in-person meeting when everyone's there, but I think it'll be a stretch for the technology, or it's the next challenge for the technology to properly facilitate both the in-person and online so that no one's adversely impacted. for meetings. In terms of conferences and things, I think it might drive conferences to try and pick dates close to each other and in the same location, so that if you do travel, you get the maximum benefit out of it. And then for other people who maybe aren't as keen, or the conference isn't as relevant to them, they can join online, but I think you still miss a lot of the activities that go outside of the lectures, and I don't see an easy way at the moment for Zoom or other applications to really fulfill that role currently. And hopefully that might change in the future, but I see that being maybe a couple of steps further down the line before we can do things truly, it's truly the same being remote or in person. I think it's the same when we were doing the remote mobility or remote co-working. It was very beneficial for everyone to be working on the same thing at the same time, and you could have that discussion on the topic and you could get that immediate response. So it was very similar to working in the office with someone, but you miss that cultural exchange and also the discussions you would have potentially with people that weren't in the project, or that you didn't go over specifically to see, but happened to bump into in the corridors or something like that, which could spark other collaborations or other ideas which you wouldn't have otherwise had.
Exactly. There are also a lot of things like social things happening in the workspaces, right? I remember when Konstanze was there were like cakes going on and people were having birthdays and we were celebrating somebody's newborn babies and stuff. And then you all of a sudden become a part of that sort of working family together, right? So you become literally like the colleagues experiencing a different working environment. This is, I don't think ever is possible with any kind of virtual remote co-working scenario, yeah.
Didn't get cake in the remote co-working, unfortunately. Yes, no, but I also believe that we will have more virtual meetings, at least the possibility, because sometimes it might also be that you only need to join like 15 minutes of a meeting and then it's not relevant to you anymore. And even if you are working in the same town, why should you go 3 kilometers to join 15 minutes? So there's I think it's really good that we have it, and I think the transition to hybrid meetings is now a bit easier, because before we only had physical meetings, and now for 2 years everyone had just almost only virtual meetings. So we are used to listen to people that are only on the screen. So at least my impression is now when we have here a meeting, so we have meeting rooms where we have large screens, and those that join remotely are on the screens. So they are basically larger than the rest of the room. And it feels really natural to let them talk. And also when they take the word, I think sometimes it's easier for them to take the word compared to those in the room, because it's like with the volume, and if it's a bit higher, then you immediately everyone is listening. So, but yes, but I think it's more like Michael said, there are technical challenges that need to be solved.
But
It might be that they, sorry, I was going to say it might be that the technology already exists in a lot of ways, but I think it's not necessarily always kitted out or in use in all the buildings. Certainly I can speak for us. We're still in that transition phase. Yes.
So what will be the new shares to invest in, like Zoom, right? When they had the massive, in February 2020, basically, when they had the massive increase in shares, what is the new Zoom to invest in for the hybrid solutions? Maybe it's the cameras that follows the person who's speaking in the room. That might be one thing.
But actually, I think that some people who is shy and never can take the word, because I mean, other people are kind of starting. They have advantage in that their face is bigger, because then people listen to them.
what I found in several virtual meetings is that people don't take the word so easily than in person. That there is a very uncomfortable silence every time you ask if someone has something to say. Sometimes for those leading the meeting is a bit tough.
Yes, particularly since a lot of the times in the virtual meetings, you don't know the people as well. Quite often you're talking to people outside of your company that you don't know, or I've never met in person. I think that's sometimes a lot harder.
Yeah.
Yes, but I think it's both if you know the people in the meeting and you are used to be a bit shy, it can then again be a bit easier if you're like sitting at home in your safe space. Maybe there are some that then take them a bit easier than if it only would be physically, but I think that's more something that the social sciences have to investigate. But it's definitely, it can be a challenge to get people engaged in virtual meetings.
Okay. I thought it was the opposite.
Then you are lucky and you only work with really engaged people that are willing to contribute in each meeting.
There is also the whole other sort of, how do you say, courtesies, right? Like how to use the Zoom meetings. Is everybody turning on their cameras? You cannot make eye contact anyway, even with the cameras on, and then try to ask a question to someone with the cameras off is also very, very hard, especially for the people who are running the meetings. It's like, do you think so, Konstanze? But Konstanze is like just the name on the screen sort of thing. So it is becoming harder sometimes, but also maybe we're just getting used to it and getting better. So I'm not so sure, but I think it's always weird when you're in a room full of strangers, either physical or virtual. And that stranger feeling is not going away. When I have several online meetings with several people, still feels like strangers to me. So that's an interesting thing. Again, not our field to investigate those things, but I think it's certainly an interesting thing how collaboration works in that sense for the people that you have never met maybe in person before.
Yeah, just to add on this, I think the most uncomfortable kind of virtual meetings I found were conferences where you present and no one has the camera switched on because it would be too much data traffic, and then you really have seen no reaction, and then it feels really weird because you're just talking to yourself or to a black screen, and that is really difficult. So it actually helps a lot if at least one or two other persons have the camera on and are smiling a little bit at the right times.
I think you are very right, because I mean, when I started to have video conferences, not everybody had a video camera in the computer, or because most people had the external video camera. So most of the time you end up to talk to people that had no face. And I couldn't, actually, the first time I could not talk to nothing, I mean, to a computer. So it's now everybody has the video camera, but I mean, perhaps there should be, I mean, now the connectivity is also very, very high, so there is no problem to have open the video camera. So that the meetings, important meetings, should have open camera. Nobody should be allowed to close it.
I fully agree with you on the meeting side, but for the conferences, it might still be challenging, I guess. The video conference systems that we've seen for the two biggest conferences so far, like both for Torque and Wind Energy Science Conference, happened in the last 2 years within Corona. They were both using a system where only the presenters and the chair can have a video function. So as the audience, you yourself were both muted and unvisible. So, and this is especially for wind energy science, since there is no papers attached to the presentations. It's important really to interact with the people. That's the only way that the presenter also get a feedback. And it was really hard because you needed to type in the question, which was also needed to be voted up by the chairs and so on. So the system was a little bit complicated, but at the same time, I understand, I think it was at a room, at one of the room with, I don't know how many parallel sessions, it was approximately 100 people. So at the same time, maybe up to 1,000, maybe more than 1,000 people being online, maybe we're still not there in terms of connection capabilities with the streaming. So it's depending on the scale also a little bit, I guess.
And then I think we should go back to our case. I mean, we have a project, and we have people that should work together, and then we have people that should see each other, because otherwise we'll be, I mean, you cannot meet in person and you cannot see each other. So it would be a total catastrophe for the social part. If we complain that there is no contact, social contact. So I mean, in this respect, the camera is necessary
For sure.
to create a group, a team.
Yeah. It's a must, maybe not even enough, but it is a must, yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, but then I think one thing that perhaps we should, I would like to kind of, what this remote co-working or virtual mobility, or do you agree that perhaps we should keep the two and then try to push them together and see what is the reaction of other projects, other people about this? Because for my idea was that this transition between mobility and the co-working, because they should be kind of linked together. The fact that we cannot see each other, that we can work somewhere, there is still a mobility that we want to replicate.
I think there's strong benefits to having the hybrid. So you still do a mobility for all the reasons that were discussed before, but you can more frequently do virtual mobility or remote co-working, just for particular tasks within a project. So if you have 2 or 3 people that need to work or need to deliver something, you can schedule a couple of days where that's what you're going to focus on. And for the majority of that day, all 3 of you are working on that particular task. And I think you make much faster progress in doing that. But I still think there are merits to the traditional mobility scheme.
Yeah, and that will be a kind of agile methodology to work to make such a sprint, working sprint, and to make the most of the time spent in the project.
Yeah, because also you have these tools for co-working, writing a document together. So that's something that can be added value.
They certainly help. They also have chat functions. So you can use several platforms when you're working on a document together.
Yes. Okay. Anything else you want to say? I mean, to enhance messages for the future?
Well, I suggest for the other coordination actions to follow, if there's anything. So as a coordinator, maybe one advice is to not give up on the mobility schemes. I think they're still very useful, and Corona or the travel restrictions might be still fluctuating in the coming few years, perhaps, depending on how, of course, the pandemic is going to progress, but still it's a very good start, and it should be done when it's possible. And also consider the virtual mobility or the remote co-working maybe as a fallback option, and like suggested earlier, maybe also have that more frequently based on the tasks and the deliverable dates. So one suggestion from my side.
Fantastic. I think we agree. I mean, I agree. I mean, at least I cannot take the other people.
We all agree. We all agree. Yeah.
Fine. Okay. So thank you very much for this very nice discussion, and yeah, and then I wish you all good luck with the future. I will be around 1 year more, but not, I don't think more.
Thank you so much for all your organization, Anna Maria.
But
Thank
thank you
you.
for
Yes, thank you.
giving me this
Thank you.
possibility. Okay, bye. See you.
Bye.
Good luck. Bye.